Welcome to Occult Archives. We don't shy away from the whispers and warnings. We dive right into those feared books, those texts that have intrigued and often, honestly, been misunderstood throughout history.
It's about extracting the knowledge, the insights, maybe even a touch of the uncanny.
And you, dear listener, have led us to a particularly fascinating one.
A.P. Sinnett's Echoes from the Inner Temple, the collected fruits of occult teaching.
That title alone, well, it hints at something beyond the everyday, doesn't it? And you, our listener, clearly want to go deeper to understand these forces shaping our reality.
It's ambitious, this worldview Sinnett's offering.
Our mission in this deep dive is to explore it all. From the very nature of divinity itself to the intricate, and I do mean intricate, tapestry of cosmic and human evolution.
Ready to unpack this.
Let's do it. One thing that struck me right away was Sinnett's starting point. You'd expect, in his time, the usual clash, right? Science versus religion.
But instead, Sinnett highlights a shift. Prominent scientists, big names, actually declaring their belief in God, and not just as a personal thing, but as a fundamental principle for their work.
Like they'd hit a wall and realized, wait, there's more to this story.
And what's even more interesting, he doesn't see this as the end point, it's just the beginning. It's like the doors cracking open to the interconnectedness of everything, the seen and the unseen.
And through that crack, Sinnett paints a huge, and I mean huge, picture, a divine hierarchy, not just within our little solar system, but extending way beyond.
A structure, with purpose, suggesting intelligent design on a cosmic scale that we probably can't even grasp.
Okay, stay with me here. So within our solar system, he says each planet has its own unique conditions, the right stuff for life to form, but not necessarily life as we know it.
He talks about vehicles of consciousness.
Vehicles like what, spaceships?
Not quite. More like the forms, the bodies that consciousness takes on, shaped by the specific environment of that planet. Imagine life on Jupiter. With that insane gravity, it'd be wildly different than, say, something on Mars with its thin atmosphere.
So each celestial body, it's not just a rock or a ball of gas. It could be a living world, hosting consciousness in a way we can't even imagine.
And these planetary schemes, as Sinnett calls them, they go way beyond just the physical stuff we see through telescopes. There are unseen realms tied to each, and a divine agency, unique to each planet, governs it all. That agency is the conduit for the divine will of the whole solar system.
Okay, now my mind's really bending. If all we see is the physical, how much are we missing? A whole lot, according to Sinnett. These unseen realms, they aren't empty.
They're teeming with spiritual beings, actively directing forces, not just for the physical growth of, plants and animals, but for our spiritual development too.
So this growth, this evolution, it's happening on levels we don't even perceive.
And he sees Earth, our world, as designed for this very purpose, to nurture spiritual consciousness through our experiences in a physical body. A guiding hand, you could say, a divine agency with intentions as consistent as, say, gravity.
Not random chance, but deliberate direction woven into the fabric of reality.
That's a key point. But here's where it gets really interesting. It's not like we're puppets. There's free will, too. So this divine guidance interacts with our choices, making it a much more dynamic, responsive process.
Which brings us to evolution, right? Not just about bodies changing over time.
It's a parallel track, the development of our spiritual selves, just as important. And it goes beyond us, too. This evolutionary impulse, it's at work in the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom.
Sinnett's talking about an agency involved in the improvement of the human form, as he puts it, but pari passu with the progress of spiritual growth. Everything's evolving on multiple levels.
No, most of us, we can't perceive this agency. We're limited by our physical senses. But he says there are finer, latent senses that some individuals have. They can glimpse how this all works.
Makes you wonder what our sensory landscape could be like further down the line.
There's a quote of his, "We are ancients of the earth and in the morning of the times. Our history goes deep."
And our future potential, well, that's even more mind-boggling. Which leads to the next big idea, this great ruling brotherhood always existed, Sinnett claims.
And sometimes, get this, composed of a senior humanity.
Meaning
our recorded history, the stuff we learn in textbooks, it's just a tiny sliver of a much larger story, a continuous narrative that's been going on for who knows how long.
it's like we've been handed a single page from a massive volume. Now, to back this up, Sinnett points to a whole body of work, right? What he called superphysical science, books on spiritualism, theosophy, titles like spirit identity, psychography, the higher aspects of spiritualism, and, of course, the behemoth, the secret doctrine.
He wasn't working in isolation. This was a whole intellectual movement, people grappling with these less conventional ideas.
And it makes you curious about what they were uncovering, this abundant information in these fields.
Now, it's important to understand how Sinnett distinguishes occult science from spiritualism. He gives credit where credit's due. Spiritualism, he says, made strides in understanding the immediate experiences after death.
Like what happens right after you cross over.
But occult science, he argues, goes deeper. It's about the whole evolutionary journey, the structure of reality itself.
So spiritualism opened the door, and occult science wants to map the whole territory.
Exactly. And he talks about the limits of mediumship. Mediums, he says, are often passive instruments, open to influence from various unseen entities. This explains, he suggests, why you sometimes get inconsistencies, even, let's just say it, nonsense, in seances.
So he's not throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
He recognizes there's real contact happening with another plane of existence. But there are all sorts of beings over there at different levels, so a plane of existence. Tell us about what Sinnett believed happened after death.
He says that the personal consciousness, that thing that feels unique to you in this body that dissolves, the physical body is gone. The ego forms a new body, an astral body.
This doesn't happen all at once, though, right?
Right, it's a process. The higher self, which is connected to, let's call them more refined realms, uses this new astral body to keep expressing on the astral plane.
So it's like shedding one form and putting on another. It's a process.
And then, of course, there's the return journey, reincarnation. He says it usually involves a gradual awakening of consciousness in a new physical body. You know, your baby, then a child, and so on.
But then there are those exceptions, the child prodigies. These kids who show amazing talents from a very young age. How does he explain that?
It's fascinating. He says these individuals, these little Mozart, so to speak, they may have a strong ego influence from their past lives, eager to express itself before the new body is even fully cooked.
So that incredible talent, it's not totally new. It's more like a spark reignited from a previous fire.
But he stresses these are exceptions, not the norm. Now, the astral plane, this realm after death, it's not all harks and clouds. Sinnett mentions a third level, and it sounds, well, unpleasant. He uses the phrase varied discomfort.
Varied discomfort.
It's a kind of purgatory. It's where we confront what we did, what we felt in our past lives, and start to let go of the desires, the attachments that drove our actions. Not so much a fiery hell, but a time of intense self-reflection, emotional cleansing. And if you weren't a completely terrible person in life, this process, although tough, eventually leads to more peaceful, pleasant parts of the astral realm.
Like you're working through stuff, and then things get better. And this whole cycle, lifetimes, astral experiences, it all builds towards something, right?
The ultimate goal of evolution, a much higher state of being. He talks about these masters of wisdom, beings who achieved this long ago, and now they act as guides, mentors, for those actively seeking to, let's say, speed up their spiritual growth.
The ultimate teachers on the path.
They are agents of the divine purpose, in a way, offering guidance and support to those who truly want to evolve. He emphasizes that life on Earth, this physical life, it's crucial for planting the seeds of that growth. And the astral life is where those seeds can start to sprout. And he even says that a fairly ordinary life, a decent life, morally speaking, will lead to happiness in the astral realm.
So even a normal life has spiritual value. That's kind of reassuring. Now, Sinnett says all this profound knowledge, the superphysical knowledge, once it was secret, hidden, but now it's becoming more available. He calls it higher occultism, and he sees it as a complete system, a way of understanding the cosmos that's actually compatible with science.
It's like a grand unveiling, he says. These fundamental spiritual truths, they can clarify how evolution works, alleviate the fear of death, and outline a path for unlimited progress. He stresses how logical it is, how all the pieces fit together.
So not just blind faith. It's about an intellectually sound system based on reason.
That's his argument. And one of the big ideas here is occult pantheism. Now, he uses the term God, but for him, it's about recognizing that the supreme divinity is infinite, all-pervading, it's everywhere, in everything. But our individual consciousness, that's like a little spark of that divine source.
We're all connected to a single cosmic consciousness.
A beautiful way to put it. Then he introduces the divine hierarchy with the logos of the solar system at the top. That logos, it's like the guiding intelligence for the whole system. Sinnett says this framework gives us a scientific way to understand the core of occult religion.
A bridge between reason and the mystical. Okay, and then there's occult astronomy, and it's not your typical star charts and orbits. Sinnett calls it vital astronomy.
Because the focus isn't on measuring and plotting, it's on life. The life on other planets and how evolved they are. He says different planets are part of different evolutionary schemes. Venus, for example, is a senior scheme. Life there, human-like life, is way ahead of where we are.
So the Venusians are basically our evolutionary older siblings.
According to Sinnett's sources, yes. And he also says that even within these grand schemes, free will's still at play. So some individuals from Venus, those who didn't quite make it to the next level, they might end up joining the human race on Earth. Kind of a cosmic second chance, you could say.
Okay, I'm trying to picture all this. So there are Venusians ahead of us. Then there are Martians, the laggards, he calls them, who maybe haven't developed as fast, but who might have knowledge or abilities we've lost. And then there's Mercury, even further ahead than Earth, where some of those highly evolved, but let's say not fully successful Venusians end up.
He paints a picture of a solar system teeming with life, all at different stages of development. A far cry from just lifeless rocks and gas.
So where does all this knowledge, this occult information, come from? It's not like Sinnett just made it up, right?
He says it's revealed gradually, trickling down, so to speak, from the higher levels of the divine hierarchy to qualified individuals. But humanity wasn't always ready for it. We had to develop morally, intellectually. He even sees the rise of science as a crucial step, preparing our minds for these more advanced teachings.
So the scientific revolution, it's not a rejection of the spiritual. It's part of the process getting us ready.
And he felt that in his time, humanity was at a crucial point. We're talking a major super-physical struggle, as he puts it, good versus evil, playing out on a cosmic scale. The outcome, he says, will determine what kind of future we have.
Makes you think about the weight of our choices, doesn't it? Now, about clairvoyance and life after death, Sinnett is pretty clear. Denying these things, he says, is just plain ignorance of the scientific research.
He was a strong advocate for taking those things seriously, scientifically. The evidence is there, he argued, and brushing it aside is no longer a valid scientific position.
He even distinguishes his occult doctrine from the traditional idea of pantheism, the kind Spinoza talked about. What's the difference?
He's careful to point out that while in occult pantheism, nature is an emanation of the divine, God is still transcendent, meaning there's a supreme being who isn't limited to or completely absorbed in the material world.
So it's not that God is just the sum total of everything in the universe. God is beyond that too.
And he tackles the idea that occult teachings are just repackaged ancient wisdom. Sure, he says, some basic ideas are old, but the way they're presented now, incorporating Western scientific thought, it's a new revelation.
Timeless wisdom in a language we can understand. Now, Sinnett also talks about thought as a force, a real force that affects our future incarnations.
It all ties into karma. Our thoughts, actions, they have consequences that echo through lifetimes, shaping our evolutionary journey. Which is why, he argues, reincarnation is the logical, necessary way for us to progress. He also addresses that question of why we don't remember past lives. We simply haven't fully developed the faculties for that kind of memory yet.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So we're back to reincarnation. It's not just about being reborn. It's about actively working towards spiritual growth.
It's our job, our business, he says, here on Earth. We're supposed to be putting in the effort, shaping our souls, preparing ourselves to participate in that divine hierarchy.
Like we're working towards a promotion, but it's a cosmic one.
And he clarifies that heredity, it's not about creating a new soul. It's about providing a body that's best suited to the incoming ego and its karmic baggage. These cycles of death and rebirth, he points out, they reflect the rhythm of nature itself. Activity, rest, repeated over and over.
A cosmic dance. And remember those masters of wisdom. He says they've figured out how to control their physical forms because they understand the underlying force of growth. That's why they can appear ageless and choose when and how their bodies change to suit their work.
Which brings us to a truly massive concept, the Great Life Wave. A progression of consciousness moving through a chain of 7 globes, including, get this, Mars and Mercury. Earth right now is the main stage for this wave of evolution.
So it's like we're all riding this cosmic wave together, but we're at different points along the way.
Exactly. And those examples, Venus, Mars, they make more sense in this context. Different stages, different levels of development. He even mentions a hell, an actual realm of suffering, part of the astral plane, but meant to be a kind of purification process for those who were truly deeply negative in their lives. Then there's that fascinating stuff about Atlantean adepts influencing ancient Egypt, those incredible structures like the pyramids and Stonehenge.
He pushes their origins way back, further than mainstream history suggests.
and connects them to occult science, the preservation of ancient knowledge. We're talking a total rewrite of history. And to clarify that thing about merging with the ego after death, it's not instant annihilation. You have a prolonged, vivid experience in the astral realm, still learning, still enjoying.
So you don't just blink out of existence.
And very advanced egos, he says, they might even retain more of their distinct personality. Those rare cases where babies remember past lives, that's usually because adepts have intervened, or the ego itself is just so strong, so eager to express its advanced abilities.
Makes those stories of child prodigies even more mind-blowing. Now, what about the Theosophical Society? Sinnett sees it as a major player in the spiritual progress of the West, right?
But he's clear that it's not about social work or politics. The mission is to study and spread this superphysical spiritual science for the benefit of all humanity.
So their focus is on knowledge, understanding.
He outlines their objectives: universal brotherhood through shared study, comparing religions to reveal their common ground, and exploring what he calls the borderland of science. That includes stuff like occult astronomy, the nature of will and matter, how atoms are actually made of ether, and even a unique take on the causes of earthquakes. He ties it all together, showing how seemingly separate areas of knowledge actually connect.
Sinnett really was trying to build a unified picture of reality. Okay, so let's bring it all home for our listeners. What is this incredibly ambitious system, this view of the cosmos from Sinnett's echoes? What does it mean for you? It's about interconnection. Seeing the links between the physical and the spiritual, the individual and the cosmic. He gives us a framework where everything is driven by a divine purpose unfolding through evolution. And here's the kicker. He suggests that our current scientific understanding is just scratching the surface. There's a whole lot more to discover about ourselves, about the universe. Maybe this sparks some questions for you about the relationship between science and spirituality, about your own hidden potential. Remember Sinnett's advice. Explore the temple cave of thine own self. Who knows what you might find there? This deep dive into echoes from the inner temple, well, it's really just the beginning. What new questions has it stirred up for you? What paths do you want to explore further? The mysteries, as always, continue to unfold.